America should be thankful, damned grateful, in fact, that government is not a business. Another week of Trump, ladies and gentlemen. We start out this week with Jen Kuznicki at Conservative Review. Now, in defense of getting things done in Washington, D.C., never mind whether those things should be done at all, some pundits say the American people are exasperated because of the way D.C. bickers too much, and some have been repeating the claim that if the current government were a business, the business would have no hope of growth and perhaps go bankrupt. Perhaps. Perhaps. They claim that since Trump is a businessman who has the ability to get things done, oh, wait till you get to this week. We'll get to it over the course of the program, and the next program, and the one after that, and the one after that, and the one after that, ad nauseum. In order for him to succeed, the government needs to be run like a business instead of the failed way it is now. They use the analogy as a lament and to perhaps take some of the blame off of Trump, as it appears he is not, it's more than just appears, he has not been able to accomplish any of the great expectations of his outsider image in his first 100 days, or the ensuing 1,360 of them, either. Now, while it's true that the business would indeed be bankrupt, the United States holds 1.5 times more debt than the top 100 American companies combined, while taking in half their revenue, according to CNBC. The pundits make a huge error in worrying about growth. In business, growth is good, but growth in government ruins the private sector. Both Democrats and Trumplicans tend to love private-public partnerships, where they are able to favor some companies at the expense of taxpayers and destruction of competition. Companies who benefit love it too, which gets into the fact that being pro-business is not the same thing as being pro-capitalist. Even though it kills off entrepreneurialism, which is, see what I mean? But I guess nobody cares about that now. I guess the mantra is jobs, 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 not start a business, start a business, start a business. And remember, jobs are a byproduct of business. They're not the purpose of a business. The purpose of a business is to earn money for its owners. It's not to create jobs. See, you got to keep that in mind. If you're a capitalist knows this. A businessman, not so much. As a patriotic lover of this nation, I think I've had enough of the consistent complaint by pundits and those hostile to our system of government that somehow life is better when everyone in Congress agrees. Because they only agree in one direction, you see. Just look at what happened this week. The argument has been used by Trumplicans to browbeat lovers of freedom into accepting the breakup of our culture and our nation's fabric. The argument has been used by Democrats as well, not to be redundant, and neither the Democrats nor the Trumplicans work to inform constituents that the job of a political representative here in America is to preserve the liberty of all Americans. They don't ever mention it because, though they took an oath on the Bible to support and defend the Constitution, it's just easier to promise goodies in order to stay in office. Too many Trump loyalists make a mistake in believing a president can do anything he wants without Congress. Remember when that was bad when Obama was president? Probably bolstered by the fact that, well, that's what Obama did. But to compare the government to a business is simply asinine. Our system of government has the president occupying an entirely different branch of government from Congress. That way, our representatives cannot be given top-down orders from a CEO-like figure, causing yes men to fall into line. Only in America does it work the other way around. Or at least it used to. And no, the people are not customers of government. They're not supposed to be, anyway. What's her name again? One of Miss Kuznicki, one of Miss Kuznicki's representatives in Lansing, Michigan, I guess she lives in Michigan, used to say that the constituents really appreciate the customer service he and his team were able to provide. Well, it made Miss Kuznicki livid because he cast himself as a representative of the government rather than a representative of her. She doesn't say here whether she voted for this asshole, but at any rate, he acted like a traveling salesman, making his way through the district, promising anyone with a complaint that he would bring it up in the next session. The people who complained that government was too big were called lunatics. Well, he must have been a Democrat then, because he was a representative of that big government. And, oh, well, I stand corrected. He was a Republican, or now a Trumplican. And that's what Michigan Trumplicans wanted. And what the people want, the traveling salesman of big government would get for them. You know, it just goes to prove that the core of the argument that government should be treated like a business is truly an argument from the left. Ironically, the far-left Democrat Party has been arguing against corporations and profits for decades, yet they treat government as the greatest business on the planet with unlimited profits because there are money-printing machines. Yeah, you thought Trump was going to get rid of Janet Yellen and audit the Fed, huh? You see, Trump is not the chief executive officer of the nation. You and I don't take orders from him, and everyone should be thankful for that. God knows I am. People should be thankful if the representatives are actually trying to support and defend the Constitution of the United States as they swore they would upon taking office, rather than preserving, protecting, and defending Donald Trump, because only then can we be free. But people are woefully uninformed about why it is so important to slash the size of government and to uphold the separation of powers. And that is what makes this particular time so hard to take. When Trumplicans are in charge of both the White House and Congress, yet only a handful are actually supporting and defending the Constitution, working on principles that actually made this nation great to begin with, and that small group is getting all the scorn, the enthusiasm factor drains, and the only winning happening is that of the status quo. Why did Donald Trump make Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina, his ambassador to the United Nations? Or the United States ambassador to the United Nations? Gee, people got me doing it now. Why did he do that? Why did he appoint the 21st century Jeane Kirkpatrick to the post that the late Jeane Kirkpatrick held and championed, exemplified so well. I mean, think about it. Ever since Ambassador Haley has shown up at Turtle Bay, she has been defending American interests, defending American exceptionalism, challenging our enemies, everything that had not been done at all, no way, for 8 years under Barack Hussein Obama. Challenging the Russians, challenging Bashar al-Assad, challenging the Iranian oligarchy, challenging North Korea. I mean, she has been awesome. Nikki Haley is a tremendous ambassador to the United Nations, which makes you wonder, well, why did Trump appoint her to that position? You know, he of the isolationism, the America First, peacenik, neo-code pink foolishness, pacifism, and all that. Well, the question, I've always had that question, really, but it came to mind again last week when Trump made a stupid joke that undermined his own UN ambassador, or ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. Andrea Ruth was pondering that question as well at Red State. Now, who was it that said Donald Trump would start acting more presidential after the inauguration? Oh, yeah, pretty much everyone who voted for the toddler man. Boy, were they wrong. Last Monday at the White House provided a perfect example of how Trump's immature and undermining behavior extends beyond the Twitter sphere. Trump should thank God every day that South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley accepted his offer of being the United States ambassador to the United Nations. She's already been an amazing asset for the U.S. at the UN. But what does he do instead? Puts his foot in his mouth by insinuating Haley could be easily replaced if the other ambassadors didn't like her. Yeah, he actually said that. Here's how the moment went down, according to Newsmax. Quote, Trump was kicking off Monday's lunch with ambassadors of countries on the UN Security Council when he asked the room if they liked Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Trump said that if they didn't, she could easily be replaced. Comment sparked some awkwardness, but seemed to be taken in jest, because you really, really would want to take that in jest, no matter how poor the taste in which it was uttered. Haley and others gathered around the lengthy table laughed. Trump quickly assured Haley her job was safe. Yeah, sure, you can take Trump's word to the bank. Just ask the students at Trump University, for example. I promise we wouldn't do that, Trump said, and praised Haley for doing a fantastic job, exemplifying everything he ran against during the campaign. In a foreign policy context. Oh, yeah, it was a joke. Sure it was. But here's the thing. It was a joke about someone being removed from her job in a room full of people Trump doesn't know. There's something about knowing your audience and acting accordingly. And joking that your own UN ambassador could be removed if her colleagues on the UN Security Council don't like her undermines Haley's position and her authority to speak for Trump. And Trump, in likely an attempt to remind everyone that he's the bully in charge, not his ambassador who garners praise on a regular basis. In other words, he's jealous. only showed his immaturity and capricious nature that he would even hint at something like that. Grow up, Mr. President. You're dealing with adults now. Act like you can handle the responsibility of effective international diplomacy, even though we know you can't, but you're playing a role, right? And stop embarrassing those representing your administration, which is embarrassing enough all on its own because of you, especially those who are clearly your betters. Gee, you think maybe Trump might be starting to regret the Nikki Haley pick for U.S. ambassador to the UN? I mean, Joe Cunningham was wondering about that last week. Now, we knew the moment Donald Trump picked Nikki Haley to represent America on the international stage that it was an awesome pick. But is Haley, one of the best conservatives our side's got, really going to mesh with what passes for Trump's worldview? Maybe not, it seems. According to The Hill, the State Department is asking for Nikki Haley to get her public comments as ambassador to the UN cleared by Trump first. That's like Miss Crabapple having her work reviewed by Bart Simpson. Here's the quote from thehill.com. The email maintained that her comments should be re-cleared with Washington if they are substantively different from the building blocks or if they are on a high-profile issue such as Syria, Iran, Israel, Palestine, or North Korea. Haley has previously maintained that she checks with the administration about her statements. She told CNN earlier this month that Trump has given me a lot of leeway to just say what I think and interpret what he thinks. I mean, say what she thinks. Isn't that Trump's style? He tells it like it is. He shoots from the hip. This is supposed to be a good thing, right? And if that's what Nikki Haley does, then, hey, maybe that's why Trump picked her. I mean, she's not... I'll say it again. Nikki Haley is the 21st century Jeane Kirkpatrick. She's awesome. She is as good a UN ambassador as it is turning out in practice, or U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, as John Bolton would have been. And Trump has a problem with that. So now he's trying to cut her ovaries off, so to speak. I mean, if there was one person, if there's one person who is making Trump look good right now, it's Nikki Haley. She is doing exactly what needs to be done on the global stage, reasserting that America isn't going to stand idly by anymore and not putting up with the international community's bullshit. Cunningham wrote tomfoolery, but I like my word better. I also highly doubt that Haley is going rogue at all. But it could very well be that Rex Tillerson, the Russophile of... Remember he got the Russian equivalent of the Medal of Freedom from Vladimir Putin in 2013? Remember that? Could be that Rex, who has fumbled several talking points himself, is not happy he's being overshadowed on the global stage. Although, in the backdrop of American history, it wouldn't be the first time that a Secretary of State was eclipsed by somebody who was supposedly a subordinate or of lesser stature. I mean, remember... well, I guess this kind of proves the point. Remember Richard Nixon's first Secretary of State? And how nobody, you don't remember him, do you? Because Henry Kissinger, who was, I think, National Security Advisor before he became Secretary of State in Nixon's second term, completely overshadowed him. Happened more than once throughout American history. But Tillerson and Haley are set to appear together at the meeting of the United Nations Security Council, so oh hell, you can Google it and see how that turned out. I'm pretty sure it didn't turn out well for Tillerson or Trump. A year and 3 days ago, I departed officially, formally, the Republican Party. Why, you may be asking? Because the Republican Party left me by nominating Donald Trump. No true conservative could remain in the Republican Party after that. Period. The final straw, the shark jumping moment. Once that happened, once Trump was the presumptive GOP nominee, it was over. No true conservative who believed in and was serious about their principles could remain in the Republican Party after that. Because Donald Trump is not a conservative. Donald Trump is a liberal Democrat. He's always been a liberal Democrat. And he ran as a Republican in order to sabotage conservatism, sabotage the GOP, and turn once and for all the United States into a one-party Democrat-run state. Period. Exclamation point. By exemplifying every negative stereotype that heretofore had been false that the left had ever vomited upon the grand old party. And every single week, almost every single day, he continues to embarrass and humiliate the party that I was proud to inhabit and be a member of for 36 years. Here's another example of it. April 24th, Jim Jamatis at Red State, headline, Boorish Trump uses 9/11 as a ratings benchmark to proclaim his own greatness. Yeah, make America great? No, make Trump great. See, there's no way anyone could argue that Donald Trump is not an arrogant clod. It's bad enough that he boasts about his TV ratings like a drunken frat boy bragging about his weekend sexual conquests. But using 9/11 as a benchmark for measuring his self-perceived greatness is almost obscenely boorish. And he actually did that in an interview with the Associated Press. The interview is classic Trump. Complete sentences are rare, and it comes off as both arrogant and whiny at the same time. He's so awesome, but nobody will recognize it. It's embarrassing. Here's the quote. AP. And that's one of the difficulties I think presidents have had, is that you can have these personal relationships with people from the other party, but then it's hard to actually change how people vote or change how people, and now Trump interrupts, of course. No, I have. It's interesting. I have seemed to get very high ratings. I definitely. You know, Chris Wallace had 9.2 million people. It's the highest in the history of the show. I have all the ratings for all those morning shows. When I go, they go double, triple. Chris Wallace, looking back during the Army-Navy football game, I did his show that morning. AP, I remember, right? Trump continued rambling. It had 9.2 million people. It's the highest they've ever had. On air. See, Dickerson had CBS Face the Nation, or Deface the Nation host John Dickerson, had 5.2 million people. It's the highest for Face the Nation, or as I call it, Deface the Nation. It's the highest for Deface the Nation since the World Trade Center. Since the World Trade Center came down. It's a tremendous advantage. Those of you out there who had loved ones who died in the 9/11 attacks, he's pissing on your loved ones' graves, right, with that statement. I have learned one thing because I get treated very unfairly. That's what I call it, the fake media. And the fake media is not all of the media. You know, they tried to say that the fake media was all the... No. The fake media is some of you. I could tell you who it is 100%. Sometimes you're fake, but the fake media is some of the media. It bears no relationship to the truth. It's not that Fox treats me well, it's that Fox is the most accurate. He went on to brag about how awesome he is at calling terrorism. AP, do you believe that Fox... Trump interrupts again. I do. I get treated so badly. Yesterday, about the thing. Julie, do the thing! Sorry, it's a Legend of Korra reference. Yesterday, about the thing, you know, when I said it's a terrorism. It's a terrorism. It may be. I said that it may be a terrorist attack, and MSNBC, I heard, went crazy. He called it a terrorist attack. They thought it was a bank robbery. By the way, I'm 10-0 for that. 10-0 for that. I called every one of them. Every time they said I called it way too early, and then it turns out that I'm whatever. It turns out that I'm whatever? Whatever. In the meantime, I'm here and they're not. What? I mean, don't you just pity whomever has to transcribe these interviews? You know, Trump doesn't seem to realize that his ratings get a big boost because people don't want to miss it if he says something asinine, which is pretty much akin to his breathing. Ratings are not an objective indicator of quality. If they were, his approval ratings wouldn't already be in the toilet. I'm sure you've all been noticing all the frantic goalpost moving on the part of hardcore Trumpers, trying to reconcile Donald Trump's ludicrous, grandiose, narcissistic promises, you know, in other words, his con artistry, of the campaign trail with the pathetic and perfidious results of his first 100 days. Now, all of a sudden, all these Trumplicans that were all for burn it down and drain the swamp, and how Trump was their hero, their messianic figure, because he was going to perform miracles that only he could perform. Because he was an outsider, he wasn't a professional politician. That's what we needed. And now he's turning out to be everything that he ran against. And so now, all of a sudden, Trumpers are born again realists. Oh, give him a chance. Give him time. He'll get to it eventually. He'll get it. He'll keep all his promises eventually. Yeah. Wait. Be patient. Trump did not run on patience. He didn't. He did not run on patience. He ran on he was going to do everything on day one. He was going to do what nobody else could do. He was going to work miracles. And that's why his base became a personality cult. And now he's failed, and they say, well, they lower the bar. They lower the bar to the center of the earth. Just like the Obamists of old, ladies and gentlemen. Well, you know what? I agree with Jay Caruso on this. Donald Trump cannot complain about the 100-day standard because he said it! Saturday, April 29th marked the 100th day of the Trumpidency. Now, I will be blunt and say that outside of the nomination of Neil Gorsuch to the United States Supreme Court, it's been a disaster! Signing a slew of executive orders is meaningless. You know why? Because they can be reversed by the stroke of a pen by his successor. Just like all the Obama illegal executive orders that Trump hasn't reversed, particularly on immigration. Executive orders are only good until the president of the opposing party takes office and reverses them. Which again, Trump has not done with most of Obama's, especially on immigration. Trump's promise to repeal and replace Obamacare has failed miserably, thanks in large part to Trump's short-sighted promise that coverage extends to everybody. In his replacement, it didn't happen. Remember the border wall and how Mexico was going to pay for it? Trump recently threatened a government shutdown if Democrats didn't acquiesce to his demands for funding, i.e. taxpayer dollars. And then he chickened out on that this week as well. Trump recently pooh-poohed the 100-day standard, as did some in the media. Now, usually I would agree. I've always been a realist. I've spent the last several years arguing with Tea Partiers about how you can't do what you want to do unless you have the numbers, unless you have both houses of Congress, unless you have the White House. You can't, without that, you can't do all the things you say you want to do. You have to be realistic. They didn't want to hear it. That's why they followed after Donald Trump. And now Donald Trump has been assimilated. Donald Trump has joined the swamp. And so now they say, oh, let's be realistic. Give him a chance. Bullshit. That's not what he ran on. He ran on being a miracle worker. He ran on being a messianic figure. Only he could fix Washington, D.C. No. You don't get that. I mean, ordinarily I would agree with realism, but in this case, it was Donald Trump who set lofty goals for his presidency and what he promised to do in the first 100 days of his administration. Remember, he was going to repeal Obamacare on day one. That's what he said. Apparently, Article 1, Section 1 of the United States Constitution got in the way. But here, Trump's contract with the American people lists a slew of policy proposals and ideas he promises to fight for in the first 100 days of his administration. Well, he's kept some of the promises. Others went the way of the dodo bird because of the realities of the office. People will point to the recent poll showing Trump retains much of his base support, which just proves how emotionally invested and stubborn they are. And that it is not, and that's not, because of that, that's not surprising. Nobody will disavow their vote 100 days into a new presidency. The question is whether or not he can keep the support over the next 18 months. His base of support is strong, but he does not impress the rest of the country, hence the abysmal job approval numbers. It's too soon to tell what will happen with congressional races, but Trump's performance thus far does not bode well for the GOP, ladies and gentlemen. Another never Trump see I told you so. See, we told you so. Trump is the leader of the party, whether people like it or not, and as it stands, the GOP standing among the general public is low. The only solace they can take is a bunch of buffoons run the Democrat Party, and they're making it more difficult for themselves to regain control of Congress in 2018, which ought to be a cakewalk for them. I mean, tribalism, folks. Tribalism. The only thing that may save the Republican Party from its Trumpist, Trumpite, Trumpoid tribalism is the Democrats' insane tribalism. Resistance. God. What self-aggrandizing nonsense. Democrats could co-opt Trump so easily. They don't want to pull their heads out of their asses. Heck, if they would go circle all the way back around to 1992 and get Bill Clinton's political sense. That said, Trump has no room to complain about the criticisms of his first 100 days. He made the promises, and he's, by God, going to be held accountable to them. You see, with Trump, I don't like really the term flip-flop because it really doesn't capture the sinister nature of Trump's betrayals. I prefer the term sellout because that's pretty much what it is. Trump selling out his base on yet another promise. Kimberly Ross wrote about well, there have been so many since then, but the latest one as of April 25th. The Trump administration is defending the Obamacare contraception mandate. Yes, this from the same man to whom Trump jellicles sold their souls. Donald Trump was going to restore religious freedom, but he's defending the Obamacare contraception. I don't know what it's going to take to make you people admit how badly, how horribly you got swindled, bilked, taken, hoodwinked, hornswoggled. 96% support, base support, huh? In a complete reversal of what was promised on the campaign trail, the Trump administration is continuing to hold up a key element of Obamacare, namely the contentious contraception mandate. This requirement in the Unaffordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, has caused many problems for religious groups who are morally opposed to providing birth control to their employees. As it stands right now on this issue, the Trump administration looks like Obama 2.0. According to the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, quote, the Justice Department has asked the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit for an additional 60 days to negotiate with East Texas Baptist University and several other religious schools and nonprofit groups objecting to a requirement to which they are morally opposed. Several religious groups are dismayed and confused by the Trump administration's move. What's there to be confused about? You got took! To coin a phrase. You got taken. You got swindled. Fooled. Dismay, I can understand. Confusion? No, they have no right to be. They are not entitled. They don't have the right to be confused. They knew. You could have known. Just look at the man's background. Vet the man, for Christ's sake. Several religious groups are dismayed and confused by the Trump administration's move, including the Little Sisters of the Poor, a group of nuns that fought the mandate for several years but expected an immediate reprieve under a GOP president. Well, Trump's not a GOP president, I'm sorry to have to tell you. Now you're finding out the hard way. They believed either the Justice Department would halt its appeal in the case or the administration would seek a rules change from the Department of Health and Human Services. East Texas Baptist University and other plaintiffs, represented by the nonprofit law firm Beckett, are now asking the Justice Department to drop its appeal of a district court ruling in their favor, allowing them permanent relief from the mandate. conservatives who oppose the birth control mandate on religious liberty grounds are bewildered. Oh, I guess those would be cuck-servatives then. Bewildered by the move at a Justice Department headed by former Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama, who is well known for his conservative views, but he sold them out in order to follow after Donald Trump. As things stand now, it appears that Justice plans to continue defending the way the Obama administration applied the birth control mandate, said Eric Rosbach, a Beckett attorney. That just seems to be very contrary to what they've been saying publicly, Rosbach says. End of quote. I tell you what, you Trumpers are drowning in Schadenfreude. And we never Trumpers are laughing our asses off at you on a daily basis. Because you knew, you could have known, we warned you, you didn't want to hear it, you were angry! Well, how are you now? How do you feel now, suckers? Yes, it is very contradictory to what they have said publicly. Because Trump was lying. The religious groups in question were certain the promises from Trump regarding this requirement of the Unaffordable Care Act would be swiftly dealt with, not supported. Well, how stupid are you people then? Priests for Life were hopeful in January, as the Washington Times reported. Quote, oh man. Pro-life advocates say they're counting on Trump and Tom Price to free religious nonprofits from the mandate requiring them to file a certification if they want to opt out of providing birth control for their employees. We are fully confident that Trump, Price, and the entire new administration will act as swiftly as they can to bring this long saga to a conclusion, said Father Frank Pavone, director of Priests for Life, a pro-life ministry that opposes emergency contraceptives that equates with abortion. Father Pavone, you are an idiot. I-D-I-O-T, idiot. Moron, M-O-R-O-N, moron. These groups, eager to be out from under a requirement which goes directly against their beliefs, will have to wait at least 60 more days while Trump's Justice Department negotiates. Whatever that means. What the hell would they have to negotiate anything? Negotiate with itself? That the Trump administration is wasting any time supporting this mandate ought to be unacceptable to Trumpers. This is a matter of religious liberty, and what the current administration is doing now goes directly against that! But no, Trumpers are moving the goalposts as fast as they can. As was written in February at Red State, a draft of Trump's religious freedom order included the following. It instructs the Secretaries of Health and Human Services, Labor, and Treasury to finally grant relief to the Little Sisters of the Poor and others who weren't exempted from the Obamacare abortifacient and contraception mandate. And the Trump executive order that he rolled out to great fanfare doesn't even do that much. There's going to be more on that in the next video. and podcast. You know, at the National Prayer Breakfast, Trump even said he would defend religious liberty. From what I'm seeing with this defense of the Obamacare contraception mandate, that was bullshit! 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 Bullshit!
You're not still the reason to play.
Bullshit! Let's go bullshit! Are we really living in Trump's America? Yes, we are, Ben Shapiro. This is from Conservative Review, April 26th, 2017. For the past few months, whenever someone on the left says something particularly insane, conservatives immediately snark back, Trumpers immediately snark back, this is why Trump won. To a certain extent, they're right. The palpable anger on the radicalized left that helped govern America into political polarization drove its mirror opposite, its mirror image, I should say, in the Trump movement. And Trump sits in Mar-a-Lago as a result. Well, he comes to the White House for photo ops. It's like his guest cottage, I guess you could say. But there's a more important question that must be asked as we approach the 100, as well, we passed it now, the 100th day of the Trump administration. Has Trump actually changed anything in America? The 100-day mark means little in reality. As Trump points out, it's an arbitrary deadline. There have been presidents who did little in their first 100 days and ended up with a solid legacy. I don't know what legacy Bill Clinton has beyond the pecker tracks and a lot of dirty jokes. And those who did an enormous amount and ended up imploding, like Lyndon Johnson. But here's what the first 100 days actually do. They set the table. Ronald Reagan set the table for his administration by pushing for lower taxes over the protestations of the Democrats and militantly standing against Soviet aggression. Bill Clinton's failures in his first 100 days set the stage for his move to the center. By his second term, he declared that the era of big government is over. Which it wasn't, obviously. Barack Hussein Obama came into office promising change. That change did not come chiefly in the realm of policy. His only lasting policy change appears to be Obamacare, which is currently bankrupting itself across the country, but in the political heart of the country. Before 2009, Americans yearned for unity. That's why Obama was elected. We were tired of the polarization of the Bush years. We were sick of the feeling that half the country wanted the other half gone. Now it's just been divided into thirds, I guess. Obama pledged to change that. Remember what he said in his keynote speech at the 2004 Democrat Convention? Not blue states or red states, but the United States. Well, that pledge came on the back of big government promises. America could be united, Obama seemed to suggest. Oh, if we only believed in him personally. You know, light bringer, Lucifer, some kind of a god. That's what Obama achieved in his first 100 days. He changed the nature of the political debate by suggesting that big government could earn your trust, that he would demonstrate the dedication necessary to turn government into an avatar of this newfound unity. And until the advent of President Trump, I didn't think there could be anything else in American, or ever would be anything else in American political history that would be more fundamentally dishonest. I mean, Trump is doing what Barack Obama could only dream of. He is carrying out the left's agenda from within the Republican Party. Even Obama never came close to that. And then, of course, Obama utilized government power to push for hardcore leftism, which polarized the country. But then he never had any intention of unifying anything. Obama's 100-day vision failed, but Trump has yet to replace it with anything new. Trump's Make America Great Again sloganeering hasn't promised a new unity of purpose. It has actually exacerbated a reverse polarization. His policies are not discussed in terms of helping all Americans. They embody a political sectarianism pioneered by Obama and hijacked by Trump. Trump's first 100 days have not moved the American story in any marked way at all, actually. We're precisely where we were 101 days ago. 111 days ago now, I think it is. That doesn't mean he hasn't had policy victories. Most obvious is the confirmation of Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, with which Trump had the least to do of anybody. But it does mean that there is no vision upon which he calls Americans to the table. There are just things he wants and things he doesn't, and Americans he likes and Americans he doesn't. If past trends hold, that means his administration will continue to be a haphazard agglomeration of random partisan prescriptions without any basis in a thoroughgoing vision of Americanism. Because he's not about Americanism, he's about Trump. We're all here, and he's the president, and that's that. But while such lack of vision can work in an oppositional setting, as a rejection of the status quo, it cannot move America forward in any real way. And that's why Trump must decide what he wants America to be, not just what he wants Americans to think of him, but of course he's not capable of doing that. He's not capable of providing a vision. And when he doesn't, he'll be seen as merely a placeholder, a reactionary president living in an America of Barack Obama's making. You know what he reminds me of, ladies and gentlemen? And Trekkers will recognize this reference. He reminds me of Chancellor Karg, who succeeded Azatbur as leader of the Klingon High Council in the early 24th century. And the point of which being that in the Star Trek mythos, remember the events of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, Praxis explodes. It's a moon of the Klingon home planet of Kronos, and it decimates the Klingon, Kronos' environment, and it wrecks their economy, and they require Federation assistance for decades thereafter. And Azatbur, the daughter of the martyred Chancellor Gorkon, is forced into the role of peacemaker because she's got to save her own people. But of course, Klingons, being a warrior race, it didn't sit well with them, and it was humiliating for them, but there wasn't anything they could do about it. But eventually, somebody assassinates Azatbur, and somebody working for her successor, Chancellor Karg. Well, what was Karg? Karg was purely reactionary. The only thing he stood for was tearing down everything that Azatbur had built, but he had no intention and really gave no thought at all to building anything in its place. The only thing that Karg was he wasn't Azatbur. Trump can't even say that much, because Trump is pretty much Barack Obama, just with different constituencies getting the goodies. That's basically the only difference. Obama was a socialist, Trump is a socialist. Obama was an anti-white racist. Trump is a pro-white racist in terms of identity politics. Both are big government. Both are profligate. Both have their pet big government projects and dreams. With Obama, it was green energy. With Trump, it's infrastructure. He wants to build shit. And Obama wanted to, he do whatever he did with green energy or whatever that nonsense was. The same idea, it's just different people getting the boodle. But it's still big government. So Trump isn't even different from Obama. He just has different recipients and different suckers. But he's still competent. This gets to another aspect of Trump, which always drove me nuts, because the notion that we needed an outsider, that we needed somebody who wasn't a politician, we needed somebody who knew nothing about government, who had no connection, we needed a total novice, neophyte, amateur, who had no experience, didn't know what the hell he was doing. That's what we needed in the White House. The idea that the presidency is an entry-level job. No, it's not. As the Trump regime is demonstrating, as often as his Twitter feed demonstrates what a dick he is. Here's a headline of Jim Garrity's piece at National Review from last week. The unnoticed consequences of incompetent governance. Get this, folks. Remember what the big to-do about, Trump signed the Keystone XL pipeline, he approved it, and another pipeline, and great. Bleepo bazoo, terrific. But there are at least $20 billion worth of energy infrastructure projects stalled because of the White House's failure to fill 3, count them, 1, 2, 3 bureaucratic vacancies. You think Trump is doing wonderful things, miracles for the energy sector. Well, he did approve the Keystone XL pipeline and the Dakota pipeline, but what about this $20 billion worth of energy infrastructure projects stalled because Trump is lazy and incompetent? Call it bitter irony. While the Trump administration is still trying to figure out how to fund and pass a massive infrastructure bill, Trumpulous, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act on steroids. Remember when that was a bad thing? To waste $1 trillion straight off the Fed's printing presses? Now somehow it's a good thing when Trump does it? But at least $20 billion worth of real energy infrastructure projects, 15 of them in 14 states, all 100% privately funded, meaning they're real energy infrastructure projects, and all holding the potential to create thousands of new construction jobs, are sitting in front of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission awaiting approval. Now, the commission isn't simply choosing to stall the products, it cannot approve them. Why, you may be asking? Because it needs a quorum of 3 commissioners to make an official decision, and it's been operating with only 2 since the beginning of February, while 3 empty seats are yet to be filled by Donald bleeping Trump. Remember throughout the campaign, Trump is this tremendous manager and he's a businessman. He gets things done. Bullshit. This is an unbelievably vivid illustration of how few people around Trump understand the federal government they've been tasked with running, which is kind of why you need someone with experience, you see, a professional. Politics isn't business. Government isn't business. Remember what we started out this program, this video with? Getting 3 new commissioners confirmed to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, isn't sexy. It won't get talked about on cable news, which is why Trump could care less about it. And it's less fun than lashing out at the New York Times, but the consequences of failing to do so are real, as the thousands of unemployed manual laborers waiting for pipeline jobs can attest. 3 names have surfaced as likely nominees: Jones Day lawyer Kevin McIntyre, Pennsylvania Public Utility Commissioner Robert Powelson, and Neil Chatterjee, a former supervisor to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. The bad news is that none of them have been formally nominated, and no one is quite sure when their nominations might be sent to the Senate for confirmation. I think they're just waiting until they've got everyone's paperwork in order to announce, says a well-placed and pathetically optimistic, over-optimistic Senate GOP source. No other issues there that I'm aware of, well, except for the fact that Donald Trump is lazy and incompetent. See, this is the risk of putting a man with no governing experience in the White House and allowing him to surround himself with similarly inexperienced subordinates and pitting said subordinates against one another almost as a matter of course. It appears that not enough people in the Trump orbit are attending to the basic, easily accomplished tasks that serve an allegedly Republican administration's focus. The largest project comes from Driftwood LNG Pipeline, which has proposed a massive new liquid natural gas export facility and pipelines near Lake Charles, Louisiana. The project is slated to cost anywhere from $13 billion to $16 billion and is expected to create approximately 6,400 jobs during construction and 400 permanent ones afterward. Spire STL Pipeline wants to construct a new 66-mile steel pipeline running from Scott County, Illinois to St. Louis County, Missouri. The $220 million project was originally scheduled to begin construction in February and be in service by November. In the Northeast, Transcontinental Gas Pipeline Company wants to expand its transmission system in Pennsylvania and New Jersey and its offshore natural gas pipeline system in New Jersey and New York. This would require building new compressor units in Chester and Lancaster counties in Pennsylvania. The project is scheduled to cost nearly $1 billion and was scheduled originally to be in service by December 2019. Then there are the projects that aren't even being submitted to FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Late last year, the Commission rejected an initial plan from Vereson to build a gas export terminal and 232 miles of pipeline in Oregon, a project that would have cost $7.6 billion, citing concerns about demand. The company believes it has addressed some of the agency's concerns about a lack of overseas buyers, but there's no point in sending a new proposal to a commission that lacks a quorum. Wait a minute. Let's look at this for a moment. Louisiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan. Why, these are all states that voted for Donald Trump in November. And it seems safe to assume they did so in part because of his pledge to bring back jobs and rejuvenate America's energy industry. Suckers. Yet energy infrastructure projects in these states cannot get started because the Trump administration has failed to give FERC a quorum of commissioners. We warned you. Never Trump warned you. Yes, potential administration nominees need vetting and background checks, and Trump didn't come to Washington with a bulging Rolodex of policy wonks eager to work in government. Yeah, I bet Ted Cruz would have. But there's evidence that the administration's failure to fill FERC's empty seats is due, at least in part, to basic inattentiveness and sloppiness. Read incompetence. Asked about the slow pace of nominations and filling administrative jobs, a lobbyist told Politico earlier this month that, quote, honestly, I don't think it's a huge priority for the White House. Gee, you think? Ironically, the administration's failure to nominate FERC commissioners who would enact its own priorities has brought about results its ideological foes prefer. Now, maybe it isn't as ironic as Mr. Garrity thinks it is. Last September, Winona LaDuke, Ralph Nader's erstwhile presidential running mate, lamented that so many oil and gas companies were attempting to expand pipelines across the country. All of the catastrophes that are happening elsewhere in the world have to do with the fact that North America is retooling its infrastructure and going after the dirtiest oil in the world, LaDuke said, warning that America will add hundreds of millions of tons of CO2 to the environment if these pipelines are allowed through. Ah! Gee. Who could have guessed that all LaDuke needed to stop so many pipelines from going forward was an administration that couldn't be bothered to fill a few bureaucratic vacancies? Still think there's not a method behind this madness? To modify a phrase, if the Trump administration doesn't get rid of any Obama administration holdovers, is it not still, in effect, the Obama administration? And is there any practical difference between Trump touting Obama's policies and just passively letting the Obama brain trust continue to run the government? Or the executive branch, at the very least. Dan McLaughlin, the baseball crank, headlined it this way at the corner at National Review: will slow staffing cause Trump and Sessions to side with Obama, for example, against the little sisters of the poor? See how this all ties together, ladies and gentlemen? See, one of the ongoing failures of the Trump administration has been the glacial pace, as we discussed in the previous segment, at which the administration has filled the policy-making jobs reserved for presidential appointees. A staffing crisis due mostly, if not entirely, to the failure to nominate people for most of the open sub-cabinet level positions. As Byron York elaborates, and we'll get more in depth into his piece at the Washington Examiner a little bit later in this video and podcast, out of 553 important positions that require Senate confirmation, and that is by no means all the political appointments Trump has to make, only 22 Trump nominees have been confirmed, while another 53 have either been formally nominated or are awaiting formal announcement of their nominations. That leaves 478 jobs with no nominee at all. 85% of those important positions that require Senate confirmation. To give a few examples, there are 113,000 employees in the Department of Justice, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions is the only Senate-confirmed Trump appointee there. And what was the Justice Department under the previous administration? The Commissariat of Injustice and Revenge. Remember? So aside from Jeff Sessions, the rest of them are all Obamunists. All of them. And you wonder why nothing is getting done that Trumpers thought they were electing Trump to get done. There are 742,000 civilian employees at the Department of Defense, and Defense Secretary James Mattis is the only Senate-confirmed Trump appointee there. There are 105,000 employees in the Agriculture Department, and there are no Senate-confirmed Trump appointees there at all. It's Obama's bureaucracy. Trump is just sitting on top of it. And he appears to be perfectly content to do so. Why do you think that is? Remember the old phrase, the old adage, the old axiom, actions speak louder than words, no matter how loudly the words are screeched. Actions, not words. I don't care about Trump's words. Look at Trump's actions. His actions don't match his words, do they? The staffing crisis comes just as the volume of such jobs has been exploding. As James Piffner of Foreign Affairs observes, from 1964 to 1984, 48% of presidential nominees were confirmed within 2 months. From 1984 to 1999, only 15% were confirmed within the same time span. York identifies 2 reasons for this. One is a political amateur, putting it mildly, who only recently entered politics in any serious way. Trump had little time to generate a crowd of staffers, supporters, or allies who would build up mutual trust and loyalty with Trump from prolonged service together on campaigns and common causes. Or what York calls Trump's lack of a long march. Gee, you think Ted Cruz would have had that? I mean, such loyalists have always been a key feature of successful White Houses. Going back to George Washington staffing key positions with old Continental Army aides like Alexander Hamilton and Henry Knox. And 2, in Trump's business career, he was accustomed to relying on a small circle of cronies, mainly family. So he's more accustomed to just asking Jared Kushner and Ivanka to handle one issue or another than he is in hiring large numbers of people he doesn't know. Trump has made more good hires than bad so far, including Neil Gorsuch for the Supreme Court, but he simply cannot personally interview and size up everyone he needs to fill the open positions. Piffner notes a 3rd reason. The transition team under the direction of Chris Double Cheeseburger Christie didn't seriously prepare to staff an incoming administration before Election Day, and you're going to love this, because nobody really expected Trump to win, not even Trumpers themselves. Which I observed at the time. Oh, Trumpers are all ready with their conspiracy theories on how Trump got robbed and how the election was rigged. And then, oh, what do you know? He won. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Amateur hour cubed. And that leads to a fourth reason why Trump is having trouble hiring. His relationship with the Republican Party remains badly strained behind his facade of unity. One can only hope. Many qualified people, this gets to Trump's small-minded, petty vindictiveness. Many qualified people, especially in the national security and legal communities, are either unwilling to work for Trump or disqualified from doing so because they took strong never Trump stands during the campaign. In other words, they're true conservatives, and Trump wants no part of them. What does that tell you? Piffner notes that 50 former national security professionals who had served in Republican administrations from Nixon to George W. Bush signed a letter stating that Trump was not qualified to be commander-in-chief and that he lacks the character, values, and experience to be president. Truer words were never written. Signers of that document, despite their valuable experience, were not likely to be welcomed. Wouldn't have been in any case. More than a few prospective hires have seen their names floated before being shot down due to internecine fights among the administration's factions. A lot of people recognize a toxic work environment when they see one and want no part of it. And there is a fifth, mostly unspoken issue as well. You can't see me. Trump's terrible approval ratings leave Republicans a lot less confident that he'll get reelected in 2020, and it's harder to get people to give up jobs, particularly lawyers, for short-term employment for an administration that could end up as a black mark on one's resume. Hey, the reality is funny that way, isn't it? The short-term issue is, in fact, one reason why most administrations have trouble finding good people to hire in their second terms. I'm more skeptical of Piffner's claim that Trump's hiring is hampered by his desire to cut the budget and reduce the powers of key agencies. Sure he does. You know why he made a big show of, oh, I'm going to cut this agency in half and I'm going to cut the funding for that. He knew none of that would ever see the light of day. It was all for show. When the rubber came down to the road, so to speak, this week on the Omnibust for the remainder of fiscal 2017, what did Trump do? Did he fight against it? Did he use the bully pulpit to say this is crammed full of pork and this is the swamp personified? I'm not citing this, and veto it? No, he didn't, did he? Deeds, ladies and gentlemen, not words. One inevitable consequence of failing to fill key jobs is that the administration not only fails to make new policy, it ends up defaulting to allow career staffers and bureaucrats and Obama administration holdovers, guess what, to continue to push Obama administration policies that are allegedly anathema to Trump's own voter base. Suckers! A dramatic example has arisen in the litigation over the HHS contraception mandate, as career DOJ lawyers have explicitly cited the lack of Trump appointees at DOJ and HHS as grounds for continuing to fight East Texas Baptist University, the Little Sisters of the Poor, and other resistors of the mandate in court. This is from the spokesman.com. East Texas Baptist University and other plaintiffs, represented by the nonprofit law firm Beckett, are now asking the Justice Department to drop its appeal of a district court ruling in their favor, allowing them permanent relief from the mandate. This litigation has gone on long enough, the plaintiffs wrote in a petition last week to the Fifth Circuit. It is time for the Department of Justice to move on and to allow the court, the universities, and other religious ministries to move on as well. But Justice argued in his petition to the Fifth Circuit that it needs more time to litigate the case, because numerous cabinet and sub-cabinet positions in several federal agencies involved remained unfilled several months into the new administration. Sabotage, anyone? The issues presented by the Supreme Court's remand order are complex, the Justice Department wrote. Many had expected the Department of Health and Human Services to change the Obama administration's underlying rule to fully exempt religious colleges, schools, and charities from covering birth control, but HHS has not proposed any rule changes at all and did not respond to a request Monday about whether there are plans to do so, end of quote. You see, Jeff Sessions and Tom Price should prioritize changing the HHS mandate and ask the Trump White House for all the support they need to do so. But they're not doing that, are they? And so, shame on all of them if they let the slow pace of staffing continue the Obama administration's war on religious liberty. And you cannot convince me that that might not be motivated by a total and utter and complete lack of intention of making good on that promise to end Obama's war against religious liberty. Could be that the Trump administration, or Donald Trump, the Trump White House, might actually share that war on religious liberty. And it's all part of the con. This won't be the last battle that conservatives and Republicans could lose for want of soldiers willing and able to serve in the ranks of this administration. But then it seems like those who could do so much good for conservatism, so much good for what the Republican base claimed to want to fight for, and instead they nominated Donald Trump and are getting the exact opposite result. Gee, I seem to remember somebody warning about that exact outcome. Stephen Deese picked up the baton at conservativereview.com. The most absurd example of progressive pathology during Obama's reign of terror was arguably the legal assault on the Little Sisters of the Poor. Jumping the shark called, and it thinks making criminals out of chaste women because they won't pay for other women to have recreational sex is just beginning. Just begging for some karmic justice. But sadly, it may be the nuns' turn to get kicked in the ovaries once more. Because elections, well, I guess elections don't have consequences, depending on your point of view. According to LifeSite News, the Trump administration has asked the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals for 60 more days to continue the Obama administration's bullying of religious institutions. This is after several of them, including the Little Sisters of the Poor, had found at least temporary relief in multiple courts from fascism masquerading as feminism. During the campaign, though, here we go, Trump assured such groups that to force them into providing abortifacients is a hostility to religious liberty you will never see in a Trump administration. I will defend your religious liberties and the right to fully and freely practice your religion as individuals, business owners, and academic institutions. Yeah, sure he would. That is the exact moral clarity the oath of office calls for. But it was lacking in federal courts last week. Trump could simply have declined to enforce the illegitimate and unethical penalties leveled against acts of Christian conscience, even if it turns out he doesn't have the energy or conviction to engage in a crusade on behalf of religious liberty. But he didn't. And what was the excuse given? Wait for it. Wait for it. We need more bureaucracy! Yay! Is this what you voted for, Trumpers? Yes, this returning the government to the people thing from Trump's inaugural has taken a very weird turn indeed. The Department of Justice actually said the Trump White House, which is nearing it's past its first 100 days in office now, still hasn't had enough time to assemble the staff necessary to determine whether or not it's cool to force nuns to defy God. Remember what Peter and John told the Sanhedrin early in the book of Acts? You determine whether it's better to obey God or man, but we cannot stop telling about what we have seen and heard. Obey God, not men. Good grief. How many more lawyers do you need to have sufficient confidence that the Founding Fathers weren't just spitballing when they came up with that whole First Amendment thing? Always have this handy. Amendment 1. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's the first thing in the First Amendment, is religious liberty. Before speech, before right of free assembly, before free press, before anything else, religious freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, from the federal government, Congress shall make no law. Might I suggest that when the ACLU is currently suing a hospital on behalf of a man who thinks he's a woman and is upset the hospital won't perform a hysterectomy on him, the answer might be 0. In response to this, I know some of you will find comfort in telling yourselves that all this is better than Hillary, or that Trump has done some good things. Those are two things that are true, but also irrelevant to this discussion. Stop being such cheap dates, in other words. There are a lot of parents who do obvious and undeniably good things for their children, like feed, clothe, and shelter them. Yet they are so derelict at providing for their spiritual needs that as soon as they go off to college, subsidized pagan brainwashing is all but assured. Remember in the Gospels, the people who from whom Christ cast out demons, but they didn't. I mean, in fact, that was one of his parables. That demons were cast out of this man, but he didn't fill himself up with the Holy Spirit. And so the demons came back and brought twice as many with them. It's not enough just to cast out the bad, you got to take in the good. Nature abhors a vacuum, remember? Proportionally speaking, providing for your children's material needs is a necessity, but doing so at the expense of their eternal souls is an existential and eternal failure. And that's what we're dealing with here. Trump has deregulated some things, and he has had some foreign policy successes. Yeah, 59 of them. all of which I appreciate and have noted and complimented. But he has not come close to indicating that he can be or even really wants to be transformational or counter-transformational in the way that Obama was. And this is what is needed to truly undo the damage Obama did. Anything short of that will be a failure for a culture on the brink as ours is. Perhaps no group is more responsible for Trump's election, and I can't believe I'm saying this, than the allegedly devout. He owes them, well, huge. Payback shouldn't take 100 days, let alone another 60. That assumes Planned Parenthood apologist Ivanka Trump, Ivanka Kirchner, who was all but acting first lady, hasn't been persuading Daddy on this issue. That could be the real reason for the delay. You think so? Yeah, could be. How much? Oh, by the way, full funding for Planned Parenthood in the Omnibust that Trump signed Thursday, or was it Thursday or was it yesterday? Well, one of the two. What difference does it make? How much bureaucracy does it take to stop suing nuns? If your workload is too overbearing for an understaffed Justice Department, why not kick some feckless litigation like this to the curb and lighten the workload? How much more work does it require to file a withdrawal than to file a delay? I mean, that's akin with how long does it take to reverse Obama's immigration proclamation? Or his DAPA executive order? Or all the other Obama illegal, unconstitutional, unlawful executive orders, decrees? How long does it take? Just get them all in there. Draft executive orders that says, this executive order is hereby repealed, put them in a big stack, set up a signature machine, or just have Trump do it, make him work for a change. And just, Donald J. Trump, Donald J. Trump, Donald J. Trump, Donald J. Trump, Donald J. Sign them all and be done with it! Yeah. Why not? You see, if we have learned anything about Donald Trump over the past 2 years, and his supporters haven't learned a damn thing, and are determined never to do so, because to learn the truth about Donald Trump would be to turn against him. But if we've learned anything about Donald Trump over the past 2 years, it is that he doesn't learn, because he is a cosmic narcissist. And narcissists know everything. And anything they don't know, well, anything that goes wrong, anything that they screw up, well, it's someone else's fault. It can't be their fault. That's Donald Trump. Nothing is ever his fault. It's always someone else. Somebody rigged the system. Somebody's out to get him. That's hence the conspiracism, because he doesn't have 3 brain cells to rub together, which is pretty much the core of all conspiracy theories and theorists therein. I mean, how else do you explain Donald Trump making a surprising discovery of about the presidency, to wit that it's hard? Wow, being president's hard! Well, who'd have thunk it, huh? Jeez, what an idiot. Even Streef had to admit, it was kind of a little leans pro-Trump at Red State. Had to write about this because it's just, it's just strange. It's embarrassing is what it is. It's just humiliating. Trump supporters ought to be afraid to even be seen in public after what they've inflicted on the country, on the Republican Party, on themselves. Unfortunately, the rest of us who warned this was going to happen are in the same sinking boat. Last week, Donald Trump gave an interview to Reuters. It covered a lot of ground, though perhaps the most newsworthy item was Trump's admission that he considered a war with North Korea to be a possibility. Yeah, that'll calm things down. One of the more interesting parts came when Trump reflected upon how being elected had changed his life. I'm not going to be able to get through this without laughing, so bear with me. You're really in your own little cocoon because you have such massive protection that you really can't go anywhere, he said. This surprised him. When the president leaves the White House, it is usually in a limousine or an armored limousine or an SUV. He said he missed being behind the wheel himself. Oh, sure, like he ever drove himself anywhere for years. Give me a break. I like to drive. I can't drive anymore. You never drove, period. Please, maybe your golf cart, and I doubt even that. But this is the one getting attention. I loved my previous life. I had so many things going, Trump told Reuters in an interview. This is more work than in my previous life. I thought it would be easier. When Never Trumpers have talked about how Trump is an ignoramus, that Trump is a strutting cosmic narcissist, that Trump doesn't know what he's talking about anything. This is what we mean. He actually thought that the presidency would be easy peasy, lemon squeezy, winner chicken dinner, and he just come in there and just fix everything, then go out to play 4 years of golf. That he really believed that. Only he could fix Washington, D.C. And it turns out he's not the right socialist. Oh, boy. It is doubtful that Trump is the first new president to be truly awed by the difficulty of the American presidency. When Bill Clinton was first elected, Paul Begala summed up the presidency as stroke of the pen, law of the land, kind of cool. Yeah, the imperial presidency, perhaps. But the American presidency combines the status of head of state with the duties of a prime minister without the legislative clout. Head of state and head of government. I think it is particularly common for people who have been executives in the private sector to come into government with a lack of understanding of how difficult it is to get anything done in an organization where your success actually depends upon subordinates wanting you to succeed and upon winning the cooperation of people who don't work for you. This was Obama's problem, too. He thought that, well, he was president, so everybody was subordinate to him. Everybody answered to him. No, they didn't. And it doesn't work that way for Trump either. And the difference between Obama and Trump is that a lot more of the country thought that it should work that way for Obama. But Trump has made so many enemies. So many enemies. Like 90% of the American people, much forget, within actual government itself, that he is a dictator wannabe without the means of realizing that ambition. He lacks the substance, the discipline, the the ideological and philosophical compass, the intelligence to be a dictator. Even if we had those things, he still couldn't do it because that's not what our system is. Many years ago, Streif commanded an infantry company. Or when he commanded an infantry company, his girlfriend told him, "Your job is so easy, you just tell people what to do and they do it." And that is actually the way no American infantry company has ever worked. It is difficult to remove senior non-commissioned officers. Privates are hard to come by, and the Army is loath to discharge them because they don't toe your line. Traditions, and we've always done it this way, run strong. Everyone knows you, the commander, are just passing through. You may serve a year, 2 years at the most, while your sergeants and troops are in there for the long haul. To move off the point of inertia requires daily sales pitches and motivational talks, leavened with positive and negative reinforcement. Trump had a lot of responsibility in the private sector, and he had a lot of actual power. He could shut down business units with no explanation. He could hire and fire at a whim. He could say whatever he wanted. People who worked for him might not have liked him, but they had to at least pretend they did. Now he's in a situation where he has immense responsibility, but his ability to actually create change is constrained by the necessity to negotiate with other power centers, as the founding fathers intended. When people talk about, well, government doesn't work, there's too much bickering. Yeah, the founding fathers designed it that way. It's called the United States Constitution. Read it. You might learn something. It's supposed to be that way. You have to work with other power centers in and out of government in order to reach a consensus. Does Donald Trump strike you as a consensus builder? Oh boy, that's a good one. And he's subject to mockery and ridicule on a daily basis, often anonymously by people who should be grateful to him. Grateful to him for what? Setting a horrible example that, God willing, will never be repeated. The presidency, I imagine, is like Dead Sea fruit in his mouth, and he can't just cancel the season or walk away from the business, although I think he will eventually, ladies and gentlemen. The only thing I can conceive of that would keep Donald Trump in office for 4 full years would be his ego, because nothing else about it is anything. He is really dumb enough to think that it would be easy, and it's not, and he's a failure, and the only thing that would keep him in office is that if he quit, it would be admitting that he's a failure, and his ego can't abide that. I think the Reuters interview also gives us a hint as to what to look for in 2020. Back in Streif's childhood, which came after mine, one of his favorite cartoons was Mr. Wizard with Tutor Turtle. Every episode had the same plot. Tutor Turtle was unhappy with his lot in life and wanted to be something more exciting, like an astronaut or a cowboy or whatever. He would approach Mr. Wizard and ask for you know what this sounds like? It sounds like Timmy Turner on Fairly Odd Parents. That's what it sounds like. He would approach Mr. Wizard and ask for a favor. Inevitably, the episode ends with Tutor within seconds of a life-ending disaster and screaming, "Mr. Wizard, I don't want to be fill in the blank anymore." My guess is that in 2020 we're going to find Donald Trump saying it is time to let someone else build on his legacy, because I don't think he's going to want to be president anymore. Although I'm still not sure whether his ego would even permit that much. You know, Trump's utter refusal to rescind Obama's immigration proclamation executive decree. I refer to it all the time. I've been referring to it for over 3 months now. He could have signed an executive order repealing that, rescinding it on the afternoon he was inaugurated. 3 months later, plus, hasn't done it. Unlikely to be doing it. That's the track record. Those are his actions or lack thereof. Well, Daniel Horowitz noticed it last week, Conservative Review. Now, it takes some time for a successor to clean up the mess of his predecessor, but when a new president continues a patently illegal immigration program from his predecessor, at some point he must own that unconstitutional policy. For Obama's illegal executive amnesty, Trump is rapidly approaching that. Oh, he's passed it. He passed it on the afternoon he was inaugurated and didn't do a damn thing about it. Last week, White House propagandist Sean Spicer used all of the typical straw man arguments to explain why Trump has decided to keep Obama's executive amnesty in place. Isn't this the ultimate betrayal, Trumpers? Wasn't the core of Trump's campaign illegal immigration? Get rid of all the Mexicans? Isn't that was? It's more than that, but wasn't that it? Wasn't that his big splash? It's the ultimate betrayal. That Obama's immigration proclamation is now Trump's. Anyway, here's Spicer's BS. Quote, I think he's been consistent about two things. One, that he has a heart. Really? That's the best you can do? He wants to make sure that he does what's in the interest of children in particular. Oh, he's using liberal arguments. Perfect. Secondly, I think the president's priorities since he took office have been very clear that the focus will be on folks who presented a danger to public safety. Now, that's not what he said during the campaign. He said they were all going, all 30 million of them, all going to be deported. And then we'd only take back in the good ones. And that's what it's been, and that's where it continues to be. And no, it's not where it's been, and it's not where it continues to be at all. And I think he is someone who understands the issue and the priorities that need to get laid out by this country. No, he's not. And so everything that he has done has been consistent with what he said from the get-go. No, nothing has been consistent with what he said in the campaign. Presidency has been a mere opposite, especially on immigration. Now, what about the legality? The fact that it is illegal, unconstitutional to issue work permits and Social Security cards contrary to the most foundational sovereignty statutes. Well, here's what Spicer said in response. I think that his comments that he made last week, that he understands that in a lot of cases this involves families and small children who have been here, and he has a heart. There's Ivanka's influence, ladies and gentlemen. But how does that address the legality again? Huh? Besides, it is wholly inconsistent with the policies and the talking points Trump harnessed during the campaign. When Trump was campaigning in Phoenix last August, he spoke with true moral clarity on the issue of immigration in a way that shows heart first and foremost to the American people. America first? Anyone? And by extension to those who make the dangerous trek across the southern border. Quote, we will immediately terminate President Obama's 2 illegal executive amnesties in which he defied federal law and the Constitution to give amnesty to approximately 5 million illegal aliens. 5 million! In the words of Judge Smales, well, we're waiting. Trump actually revealed what was in his heart when he said in the speech that Arizona held a special place in his heart. Arizona has been beleaguered by these very myopic policies that place the emotional arguments of foreign nationals in a vacuum ahead of the broad needs and concerns of Americans. Ready for another lesson? Trump lambasted the media and Hillary at the time for not focusing on one thing and only one thing, the needs of people living here illegally. He then spoke with moral clarity of how, faux moral clarity, of how the central issue is not the needs of the 30 million illegal aliens, and that anyone who tells you that the core issue is the needs of those living here illegally has simply spent too much time in Washington. There is only one core issue in the immigration debate, and that issue is the well-being of the American people. Well, as has been demonstrated from the Rockville rape case, just for one example, it is this very promise of amnesty for families with children that is solely responsible for the recent surge in migration from Central America that has cost taxpayers untold sums of funding, burdened schools, crushed hospitals, and yes, has resulted in violent crime against Americans. And as we saw with the slew of violent incidents perpetrated by young illegal aliens, they usually have clean records until they offend. The vetting of the Obama administration was a joke because 96% of applicants were granted legal status anyway. Yet, the Trump administration is is issuing roughly 760 illegal cards to illegal aliens every day. Every day. How many is this? 108 days as of the time of this video podcast. 108 days times 760. The Obama regime has issued over 82,000 illegal cards to illegal aliens and counting. At that rate, 760 cards every day times 108 days. Even Marco Rubio said he'd only honor those cards already handed out. For this administration to renew a flagrantly illegal policy demonstrates that the campaign rhetoric of the entire Trumplican party when in opposition is an utter joke. It's one thing to show recalcitrance to ending illegal, albeit odious, policy, but to continue an illegal policy, especially when illegal aliens are the sole beneficiaries of that policy, is a mockery of the rule of law. And Trump could end this today. Forget tomorrow. Today! He could have ended it 108 days ago. With a simple display of inaction, refusing to renew any work permits. As a man who always likes to project power in the image of a winner, there is a further need for Trump to eliminate Obama's executive amnesty in light of the courts nullifying his own immigration orders. For this administration to sit idly by as Trump's completely legal, well, other than the first one, immigration orders are struck down while refusing to negotiate it as part of the budget bill, and at the same time continue the illegal immigration order of an ex-president is the ultimate betrayal by Donald Trump of his base. Moreover, courts are treating Obama's order as a legitimate law through which to force states to issue driver's licenses for illegals, which is not a legitimate law. Again, Trump could eliminate DACA and DAPA with the stroke of a pen, doesn't need Congress, because they're based on nothing more than Obama's illegal, unlawful, unconstitutional executive decrees. They do not have the force of law. They're executive orders, and Trump could rescind them like that. And he hasn't done it, and he's still not doing it. See, Trump is clearly a man who desires to check off his list of promises broken. Getting rid of Obama's executive amnesty, you would think, would have been at the top of that list. But then that whole list is toilet paper now, isn't it? Oh, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Bathroom tissue. That's the softer, more civil euphemism. Hey, at least I didn't say ass wipes. But it never ends. The betrayals, the con artistry. For example, Trump gave a speech to the National Rifle Association Leadership Forum a week ago, last Friday in Atlanta. But some observers noticed something. There was no mention of any actual gun policy in Trump's NRA speech. Chris Pandolfo at Conservative Review provides us the details. Donald Trump just wrapped up a historic... No, it wasn't historic. All right? Can we stop calling that... Just stop using that term. Stop! Expunge that adjective from anybody's coverage of Donald Trump. Nothing Donald Trump does is historic. Any more than anything Barack Obama did was historic. Trump just wrapped up a speech before the NRA convention without mentioning a single legislative proposal on gun policy. You would think, here we go again, you would think that if Donald Trump was truly a Second Amendment defender and advocate, he would have mentioned policy proposals in his NRA speech. Wouldn't you? But no, it's all shallow, sloganeering, phony baloney, plastic banana, good time rock and roll nonsense. Continuing to shine on his suckers, his rubes. Because after all, you want to be able to skin your suckers as many times as you can. Though again, telling his useful dupes what they want to hear. No longer will federal agencies be coming after law-abiding gun owners. How? No longer will the government be trying to undermine your rights and freedoms as Americans. How? Oh, sure. That's what he told a gullible audience in Atlanta, Georgia. The man who was all for the assault weapons ban back in the day. But there was no mention, however, of federal efforts led by the president to repeal Second Amendment infringing gun restrictions. Remember what I said? Deeds, not words. Trump did take time to ask Atlanta voters to vote for Karen Handel in the upcoming runoff for Georgia's 6th congressional district, to revisit his election night victory and make vague assurances about never letting anyone in the audience down, that he's letting down on a daily basis. I mean, Leon Wolf, who was He writes for theblaze.com now, used to write at Red State. He tweeted, well, he released several tweets on this Trump speech to the NRA. I literally heard zero about gun policy in that entire NRA speech, but lots about how awesome Trump was. Yeah, that pretty much captures every Trump speech. That's the template. Things not mentioned in Trump's NRA speech: constitutional carry, reciprocity reform, anything about gun laws at all. During the campaign, Trump vowed to strongly support gun rights. Words, in other words. The Second Amendment guarantees a fundamental right that belongs to all law-abiding Americans, read Donald Trump's official campaign policy position on the right to bear arms. The Constitution doesn't create that right. It ensures that government can't take it away. Our founding fathers knew, and our Supreme Court has upheld, that the Second Amendment's purpose is to guarantee our right to defend ourselves and our families. This is about self-defense, plain and simple. Well, notably absent from Trump's NRA convention speech was any mention of progress toward fulfilling his campaign promise to implement national concealed carry reciprocity. In that same campaign document, Trump said that concealed carry permits should work just like a driver's license. A driver's license works in every state, so it's common sense that a concealed carry permit should work in every state. If we can do that for driving, which is a privilege, not a right, then surely we can do that for concealed carry, which is a right, not a privilege. Fast forward to the first 100 days of the Trumpidency, which is coming to a close without either the Trump regime or Congress having yet delivered on any of the big legislative agenda items Trumplicans have talked about for years. Obamacare remains the law of the land. Tax reform is still under negotiation. And tax reform being a code word for tax increases. And there is no action on the horizon on the Second Amendment. In short, NRA Nix, you got took. You got bilked. You got swindled. You got fooled. You got hoodwinked. You got hornswoggled. Despite the legislative setbacks, Trump struck an optimistic tone with his gullible NRA audience. I will never, ever let you down. Except he already has. Ian Tuttle, National Review, expands upon Trump's Barbie-like discovery that being president's hard. Well, here's hoping he responds differently to that realization than his predecessor, but you shouldn't count on it, folks. It turns out that being president is indeed hard. I loved my previous life. I had so many things going, Donald Trump told Reuters in a newly published interview, as we mentioned earlier. This is more work than in my previous life. I thought it would be easier. Moron. Trump's plaintive remarks should come as no surprise. This is the same man who, in February, announced, nobody knew that health care could be so complicated. Oh, nobody? Really? Donald Trump, the wealthy heir to a real estate empire and complete political neophyte, unfit and unqualified for the office, was, compared to any of his predecessors, uniquely unprepared for what is quite possibly the most difficult job on planet Earth. And after 100 days in office, he's beginning, or is he, at least in his more introspective moments, which he doesn't have. Narcissists are incapable of introspection. to appreciate just how difficult that job is. Then again, Barack Obama's tenure was marked with a similar lament. I think it is important to remind everybody that I'm president. I'm not a king, he told Univision in January 2013, discussing the possibility of suspending deportations of non-criminal illegal aliens. I'm required to follow the law. Apparently not, in his estimation. The executive was, he acknowledged, only one of three branches of government, and that presented structural challenges to advancing his agenda until they didn't. Elected, like his successor, largely on his charisma and promise to transform the system, Barack Obama found himself flummoxed by it. He too thought the presidency would be easier. But where Trump's comments seemed tinged with wistfulness, oh, to enjoy unburdened the breeze at Mar-a-Lago, which he still does on a regular basis, so I'm not sure what he's complaining about, Obama's were more often tinged with frustration. In February 2013, again discussing immigration during a Google Hangout interview, he was more transparent. This is something that I've struggled with throughout my presidency. The problem is that, I'm the President of the United States. I'm not the Emperor of the United States. Until he appointed himself to that title. Now, in private, Obama was more forthright about the challenges of the office, plotting an approach to the Arab Spring that would appear supportive of democratic protesters, small d, and also protect American interests proved so difficult, he told people that it would be so much easier to be the president of China, the New York Times reported in 2011. As one official put it, no one else is scrutinizing Hu Jintao's words in Tahrir Square. That's usually known as a foreshadowing. The modern presidency, as Barack Obama ultimately discovered, is an impossible job. The president must be the leader of his party, but also the leader of the nation, the only national voice in affairs, in the words of Woodrow Wilson, who reshaped the office in the 20th century, and not for the better. It didn't need reshaping, in other words. And he must be not only the leader of his nation, but the leader of the free world on whom the oppressed can look with hope. He must be all things to all people everywhere, and yet must remain a citizen among citizens, abiding by the law, and must have the sense and humility to realize that he can't be all things to all people. Obama's response to this, is it really surprising that the modern presidency has been turned into a virtual emperorship, that it attracts people who want to be emperors? You narcissize the office, only narcissists are going to want it. Obama's response to this conundrum was to abandon the law. Well, he always planned to do that after he didn't have to face the voters again anyway. To abandon the law even more than he had before. Let's remember the full context. In favor of, as he liked to say, the right side of history. It ends justify the mean solution of which Wilson would have approved. Those same things that he acknowledged as late as 2013 were beyond his powers, he would go on to do, granting lawless de facto amnesties to nearly half the illegal population in the United States under his DACA and DAPA decrees, declaring that neither the nuclear arrangement hammered out with Iran nor the Paris Climate Accords were treaties, which they absolutely were, so that he could withhold them from Senate consideration, and unilaterally manipulating the Unaffordable Care Act when its measures proved politically costly. See, Donald Trump is being mocked as a buffoon for discovering that the presidency presents unique challenges, especially to those who seek sweeping and dramatic overhauls of American policy that the Constitution is specifically constructed to prevent. And he deserves to be mocked as a buffoon, because that's exactly what he is. But is he learning the same lesson as his predecessor? And will he reject his predecessor's reckless response to that lesson? I think the truth is more along the lines of the media, most of the country was fine with Obama's imperial presidency. But because of tribalism, those same people will never let Trump get away with it the same way. Although the people who scream the loudest about Obama will be perfectly fine with it because it's their Messiah. Right? That's why I hate tribalism with a passion, ladies and gentlemen. I hate tribalism with a passion because it is inimical to principle. You are required to throw your principles overboard in order to defend the tribe, and most especially defend the tribal chieftain. Doesn't matter what the chieftain stands for. Doesn't matter what the tribe has ever stood for. Ideas don't matter. Philosophy doesn't matter. It's us against them. Hatfields against McCoys. Eventually, you forgot what it was you were fighting over. All you know is, we hate them. They hate us. We don't know why. It just is. Sorry, ex-Tea Partiers. That's not good enough. I always used to say that the Tea Party, I and the Tea Party didn't differ ideologically. We just differed over strategy. Well, now we see what Tea Partiers' fight, fight, fight strategy got us. Now we see where it led. It led to a national socialist usurper like Donald J. Trump. That's why I say I didn't leave the Republican Party. The Republican Party left me. No choice but to go independent. As no true conservative could fail to do after the cataclysm became official a year and 3 days ago. Well, we conclude another week of Trump with last Friday's G-File, Jonah Goldberg. Today is the 106th day of Die 100 Tage. Tage? No, that's right. Der 100 Tage. First 100 days. Released the 106 Luftballons. Of course, if you're reading this on Saturday, then today is Der 100 Tage. Add 1 Luftballon, or 6 extra ones. What is Die 100 Tage, you ask? 100 days in German. See, there is some educational value in this. Well, there's loads of educational value if you're willing to listen and heed the words that I offer, but 100 days in German. There's no reason not to say it in English, save for the fact that it just sounds so much more ominous and impressive in Der Sprechen Sie Deutschen. Given how so many on the left think we're back in the 1930s Germany, which in some policy aspects we are, or at least that's the direction Trump would like to take us, I figured I'd throw them a bone. Also, I figure anything I can do to make this 100 days thing even slightly more interesting is worth doing. Well, within reason. I mean, I'm not going to sacrifice 100 bulls in front of the White House. Although the contents of their rectums would be useful for Trump's speechwriting shop. In other words, I agree with Donald Trump that the 100 days marker is an arbitrary and somewhat ridiculous device, even if he ill-advisedly invested too much in the gimmick. In other words, it served its purpose during the campaign, doesn't serve its purpose now. Gotta move those goalposts, lower that bar. And it's always been a gimmick. Even FDR's first 100 days, which started this nonsense, has been embellished by members of the New Deal cargo cult. Most of the legislation he passed was off the shelf from Congress and had been debated for years. FDR even opposed the FDIC when it was first brought up. But it is worth recalling that FDR's head of the National Recovery Administration wanted a truly impressive first 90 days. Hugh Iron Pants Johnson, I always wondered if he went by Iron Pants to keep people from saying his name too quickly. Yeah. Described, LBJ, that should have been his first name. Hugh Johnson. Well, where do you think the expression Johnson came from? He distributed a somewhat tongue-in-cheek memo at the Democrat National Convention in 1932 proposing that all members of Congress and the Supreme Court be put on an island for 90 days so that the administration could have a really free hand to get things done. In other words, dictatorship. Yay? I mention this because A, I think it's interesting. B, it's always worth making a huge Johnson joke when the opportunity arises. And C, because I think it highlights an important point. The yearning for action implicit in the first 100 days thing is not an altogether healthy one in an ostensible constitutional republic. It's not necessarily sinister either, although, yeah, it kind of is. At least if you're a constitutionalist. Now, there's nothing wrong with the newly elected president trying to translate his mandate into legislation or otherwise spending his political capital when it's at its highest. Nevertheless, there is an unpleasant cult of action implicit in the first 100 days that I've never liked. After all, that was why FDR proposed it in the first place. He wanted to tell everyone to back off and let him have a free hand in his bold, persistent experimentation. In other words, let him be a dictator. But see, that's not really how our system's supposed to work. Congress is supposed to lead the country because Congress is closest to the people. Congress is supposed to. That's one of Doug Gibbs's 25 myths of the United States Constitution. Co-equal branches of government. No. Congress is supposed to be preeminent. Then the president. President. Yeah. Presidents should not be able to say, hold my beer while I fundamentally transform America on my own. The Constitution doesn't give presidents that authority. Article 1, Section 1. See? Constitution. Right here. All, which means everything and excluding nothing. All legislative powers, law-making powers, herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States not a president of the United States. Die ersten 100 Tage von President Trump? Now, with all that said, what do I think of Trump's first 100 days? Well, since we're on an FDR kick, I'm reminded of what one-time FDR consigliere Raymond Moley said in response to the notion that there was a coherent, unified plan to the New Deal. Quote, "To look upon these programs as the result of a unified plan was to believe that the accumulation of stuffed snakes, baseball pictures, school flags, old tennis shoes, carpenter's tools, geometry books, and chemistry sets in a boy's bedroom could have been put there by an interior decorator." Close quote. This has been, as Michael Warren chronicles at the Standard, that would be the Weekly Standard, an ad hoc presidency from the outset, And like a Clint Eastwood movie or a 3-course meal of steak, tofurkey, and snails, you could say it's been characterized by the good, bad, and ugly. What's interesting to me is that I don't think Trump truly realized it was going to be like this until pretty late in the game, which just shows what an idiot he is. He said in a Reuters interview just last Thursday, that he was surprised by how hard the job was. "I thought it would be easier," Trump said. Moron. Now, on the other hand, all presidents say they're surprised by how much harder the job is than they expected. So, fine. But Trump also says that he thought his old job would be harder than being president of the United States. And, well, Goldberg can believe him, I don't. There are a lot of stories around Washington that jibe with this. Trump wanted to be something of a ceremonial figure. In other words, he's a lazy, indolent fool. A bit like a British monarch in the 19th century, who gives some direction to the prime minister, but otherwise serves as an emblem of national greatness. In other words, he loves the huge Nuremberg-esque rallies. He loves being worshipped. He loves to revel in the idolatry of the masses as long as he is its object. But actually running the country, well, he'd make Mike Pence his chief operating officer, and Pence would run the country, and Trump would just go around getting worshipped and otherwise continuing his old lifestyle. Doesn't work that way, though. Turns out there's more to the job than going around giving MAGA speeches and riffing on the media and sitting on the throne whacking away on Twitter. And to Trump's credit, it appears, that's the word you got to emphasize, appears, I don't believe it, that he's starting to understand that and act on what should have been obvious from the get-go. Don't count on it, folks. His narcissism is far more powerful than his ability to recognize reality. Now, a lot has been written of late about how we know Trump has no coherent ideological program. Trumpism is a psychological orientation, not a political philosophy. It's actually far more similar to FDRism than a lot of people realize. For instance, as Amity Schleys reminds us, Franklin Roosevelt personally set the price of gold every morning. Now, that doesn't sound good, does it? One day, Treasury Secretary Henry Morgenthau asked FDR why the president had chosen to drive up the price of gold by 21 cents. The president cavalierly said he'd done that because 21 was 7 times 3, and 3 was a lucky number. Things that make you go. Now, FDR did have a philosophy, but not a very deep one. As Oliver Wendell Holmes famously said, Roosevelt had a second-class intellect but a first-rate temperament. Although I wouldn't count on the latter either. Now, I'll leave it to others to score Trump's intellect. He's a moron. I'll save you the time. He's an idiot. But as for his temperament, if it was a ticket on the Titanic, I suspect it would be down below decks dancing on tables with the Irish. That said, I've been mildly surprised by a few things about Trump's performance so far, and most of them were pleasant surprises. Most of his appointments have been good, although I really don't give him much credit for that because it's not like he could get any Democrats to work for him because of tribalism. So he just had to pick amongst his victims and corrupt what ones he could. I think there's a lot of hype to his executive orders, but there's not a lot of substance to them either. In short, he's doing better than Jonah Goldberg thought he would, but this is an incredibly low bar. It's not quite like saying that Greta is the sexiest East German weightlifter alive, or this is the most exciting show on C-SPAN. It's not far off. Still, I hope there are many more pleasant surprises in the days to come, but don't count on them, folks. I'm telling you. We only have one president at a time, so there's really no choice but to hope he continues to learn on the job and that his team of Sherpas can help him with the climb. And there's no evidence that any of that is happening. What vexes me about the first 100 days, however, isn't what it has revealed about Trump, but what it reveals about his biggest fans. Yes? In my personal case, I'm talking about you, Joe Scarafoni and Eric Hoffman. This time last year, it was easy to find people who parroted, sincerely, Trump's claim that fixing everything would be easy. They loved to hear him say that everyone in Washington was dumb and that he had the best brain. He was a super manager, a battle-hardened Sardaukar from the ranks of the Ubermenschen of the business world. Anytime he did or said something ridiculous, Trump's defenders would either defend it on the non-existent merits or explain that his critics didn't see the genius behind his strategy. Or they would mock the notion that anyone would take what he says literally when all enlightened people merely take him seriously. Trump would rely on his instincts like a Chinatown chicken playing tic-tac-toe, and people would call him a chess master. For he wasn't any old chicken. He was the Mobutu Sese Seko Nkuku Ngbendu Wazabanga of American politics. Translated, that's the all-powerful rooster who, because of his endurance and inflexible will to win, goes from conquest to conquest, leaving fire in his wake. Mortal Kombat! Sorry. But now, and here we get back to the frantic goalpost moving. Now, Trump's biggest boosters and much of his base, according to polls, insists that they never thought it would be easy. No, they did. That Trump is doing great, even though he's failing miserably and betraying everything he promised them. And even though he hasn't been remotely able to accomplish the things he promised to do in his first 100 days, and even Trump admits that this is all so much harder than even he thought it would be because he's a moron. As an unnamed White House staffer told Politico, I kind of poo-poohed the experience stuff when I first got here. But this shit is hard! Dumbass. But you see, no one in Trump world cares, because the signature image of the Trumpidency so far is a goalpost on wheels. Being all in for Trump means never having to say you were wrong, which is the problem, you see. Then there were the folks who were mostly in for Trump, the cuck-servatives, like Douglas V. Gibbs, for example. Every day I hear people say on Twitter, yeah, he sucks, but at least he's not Hillary. But what kind of a standard is that? I mean, I'm glad Hillary's not president, truly. But if your yardstick for a Republican, allegedly, president, not candidate, but president, is now he's better than Hillary, then you filed down the yardstick to a couple of centimeters. Forget inches, centimeters. Better than Hillary strikes me as the minimum requirement for a Republican president, to forget conservative, even a Republican president, not an omnibus justification for everything he does. See, every time Trump does something stupid, pro-Trump and anti-Trump pundits rush to a TV studio to explain that he's staying true to his base, that she's not doing. It's nonsense. The base has become quite malleable in how it defines what counts as success, because if they're going to maintain the lie, the illusion, they really have no choice. Indeed, they're the ones usually pushing the goalposts as fast as their fat little legs can propel them. Moreover, Trump isn't just the president of his base, he's the president of the whole country. I always rankled when people defended George W. Bush's malapropisms and odd syntax as something to celebrate. Wasn't one of Ronald Reagan's greatest attributes his status as the great communicator? As Richard Neustadt argued half a century ago, the chief power of the president is, guess what, folks? Not signing executive orders, not Twitter, not burn it down, but persuasion. Persuasion. Lasting conservative victories can come through legislation, to be sure, but even greater ones come from changing public attitudes so that voters want to see those victories endure. FDR's New Deal was a very mixed bag at best, but the main reason so much of it remains intact, alas, is that he fundamentally changed American attitudes toward government. Just like Barack Obama did with Democrats, and now Donald Trump is doing with Republicans in the same statist left-wing nut direction. Barack Obama famously wanted to be a liberal Reagan or FDR, fundamentally transforming political orientations in the country. The ultimate verdict on that isn't in yet, but right now it looks like Obama failed fairly spectacularly in a universalist sense. It's early yet, but how is Trump doing in this regard? Is he even trying? Who outside his base, his cult, has been convinced of the rightness of conservative policies? Well, nobody, because Trump isn't pushing conservative policies. Consider that support for Obamacare, free trade, and immigration are at all-time highs. Persuasion, Trumplicans, not anger, not tribalism, Persuasion. That's what made Ronald Reagan the greatest president of the 20th century. He persuaded a majority of the country that constitutional conservatism was the way to go. Peace through strength. Yeah, neoconism. And it is the way to go. And Ronald Reagan persuaded the country that these things were right. And he didn't do it by being an asshole or a liar. You know, I keep waiting for Trump supporters to respond to his betrayals. Syria, China's currency manipulation, NATO, his claim last week that he's now a globalist and a nationalist. Remember that one? Oh, that one was so... That one, you know how I know when I've really gotten to Trumpers? When they don't respond. Because they can't. Trump actually said he's a globalist and a nationalist. A nationalist and a globalist. He really can't be both. Not according to his dumbass supporters. He bleeped them again. And they don't say anything because there's nothing they can say. You know, I keep waiting for Trump supporters to respond to his betrayals like Steve Martin in The Jerk. Quote, he doesn't realize he's dealing with sophisticated people here. Marie, now you just stay calm. Stay calm. Don't look down. Don't look down. Look up. Just keep your eyes up and keep them that way, okay? Waiter, there are snails on her plate. Now get them out of here before she sees them. Look away. Just look away. Keep your eyes that way. You would think that in a fancy restaurant at these prices, you could keep the snails off the food. There are so many snails that you can't even see the food. Now take those away and bring us those melted cheese sandwich appetizers you talked me out of. In other words, the snails were the food. Instead, we get so much of this kind of crap. I am loyal to Donald Trump. Any further inquiries, please see Rule 1. The conductor's rule, remember that? Just makes you wonder where these people are going to be 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Will they ever get fed up with being played? Will they ever get fed up with being swindled? Well, like I say, all con men need marks that can be skinned repeatedly. And Trumpers' skin seems to be an inexhaustible resource.